The whole
You go
time
right
we're
in.
gonna be texting. You're missing all the fun.
You can watch on Zoom.
You can watch it. YouTube.
I said you can watch on Zoom or YouTube.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's gonna put me right to sleep.
Well, there you go. At least it serves a purpose.
Hold on, guys. I don't know what's going on.
We don't either.
Oh, here it is.
Okay, I'm live.
Wait, why isn't the... Okay, cool.
Have you gotten any new bodies? This guy?
Yeah, and then we've got a couple of wires, but I heard a rumor that you had a wee baby.
And he didn't come in?
I'm aware of
It was for Claude's area. What area is he?
He's Riverview.
Is he on already or he's thinking about it?
No, he's applied. I just got the application on yesterday.
So Stacy has not come in and applied yet? Oh, I'll give him a call tomorrow.
Yeah, but that one's gonna be the hardest one to fill. Because I can grab one and sit too.
You think that area is going to be the hardest to fill?
The Star School
Yeah,
District.
yeah. Oh, I know quite a few. I'll get one from there. I'll get one.
Yeah, we were waiting on you.
Okay, so, yeah.
Ready?
We're up.
Yeah. All right, stop you.
Okay, it is 6:35 and I... 6:35 and I call the March 22, 2022 workshop meeting of the Franklin County Planning Commission meeting to order. Before we get into the meeting, I will turn things over to staff to discuss meeting format.
Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight's meeting will be conducted through a hybrid in-person online meeting platform. Should an individual planning commissioner become unexpectedly disconnected, please rejoin the meeting at your first opportunity. The record will reflect your attendance. The meeting will be paused for up to 10 minutes to address technical difficulties. If they cannot be resolved within 10 minutes, then the meeting will proceed. It said some other stuff about quorum, but due to the fact that we're not taking action, we do not need a quorum to proceed with tonight's meeting. This is an informational meeting to kind of kick off the subdivision, Title 16 subdivision update process. So there's no action being asked or requested of the commission and no recommendations at this time. This will come back to you at least, I would say at least 2 times between now and then. So, or there'll be more. There'll be a public workshop and then there'll actually be the public hearing. So those are out. And that.
Will planning staff please call roll?
Is the red light on?
Noted.
Okay.
Mike Krause,
Here?
Melinda Didier,
Ms. Didier indicated she was a little under the weather and wasn't sure if she'd be able to attend, so.
Mike Vincent,
Here.
Layden Lowe.
Here.
All commissioners are present except for Melinda, who is out sick.
Will staff in attendance please introduce yourselves?
Derek Broughton,
Ryan Nelson,
Planning and Building Director.
Planner 1.
Aaron Gunderson, Planner 1.
Now I will lead us in Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I'll second.
Commissioner, it has been moved by Commissioner Lowe and seconded by Commissioner Vincent. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Are there any procedural questions before we begin the workshop? Seeing none, item number 1 is a workshop item regarding the revision to Title 16 subdivision of the Franklin County Code. Presentation by Nicole Stickley.
Stick knee.
Stick what?
Knee.
Knee.
Thank you very much. Derek, did you want to say anything before I begin, or should I just go for it?
As you guys are aware, Miss Nicole is with AHBL, and they are on-call planning service consultant. God, I'm doing great tonight. Maybe I should have just let you start. And they've been working, I think even since before I came here, on Title 16 and updates to Title 17. Lots of other things got in the way, and there was a significant delay in bringing this, but here we are today, and not only will we be working on this, we have a few other items that I'll get into in the staff or the administrative report section later on, kind of looking at what we're looking at for 2022. And that's it from me. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Once again, my name is Nicole Stickney. I'm with AHBL. I'm the hire consultant for Franklin County to help you with land use planning items. It's been some time since I've been before you, but I'm glad to be back. As a reminder, this does relate back to the long and hard work that you did on the comprehensive plan update for the county. Per the Growth Management Act, on a periodic basis, the comprehensive plan needs to be updated, and then to follow that, it is important to update the development regulations and make sure that those are also updated and convey sort of the goals, policies, and direction of the county. So that's really what our approach is all about here. So we've prepared these proposed changes for Title 16, which is subdivisions. We thought we'd start off with this because this is probably a little less complex than when we get into the whole zoning code. But that will come about, as well as adopting updates to the critical areas ordinance, which is those environmental regulations for the county. And so I'll just dive right in. As you know, Title 16 is what governs subdivisions and just generally division of land in the county. It's important that we have these regulations and standards set out so that we know what is required when we get applications in. We do want to process applications for short plats, subdivisions, and other matters in an expedient manner, and we want it to be fair, and we want folks to know what is required of subdividers. And so it's important that we make sure that we tune up these regulations when we get a chance. The other thing I'll just mention before we get started is it's really been some time since any wholesale work has been done on this. So what I mean by that is some things have happened incrementally where they've made some small adjustments to Title 16, but I think it's been a while since the county has taken a look at it on the whole and really done a thorough evaluation with the comprehensive plan in mind. And so that's really part of what we're endeavoring to do here. So by way of background, the reason why we need these updates is first to ensure consistency across jurisdictions. That sounds a little vague, but the idea being that we need to make sure that we're looking at those urban growth areas in particular, and that we are, as much as possible, making sure that the development that is occurring in areas that could be later annexed by one of the cities is going to be built out in such a way that, you know, it would be appropriate to be annexed in. The second reason is to comply with the Growth Management Act. As I mentioned a minute ago, there is a requirement for a periodic update where you first update your comprehensive plan, but then you also look at those development regulations which are intended to implement that plan. And then I also noted that we need to clean up and modernize the existing code. So there's just some archaic language, there's some old stuff that really could be changed up to improve the processes, and so we wanted to be sure that we identified those opportunities for improvement along the way. You have received a preview. It's a working draft of amendments, which has been reviewed by staff and agencies. We prepared one a couple months ago that you may have received a copy of, and then the latest copy, if you go to the bottom of the document, you'll know you have the latest copy because it says this version is dated March 14th, and this is the copy for the Planning Commission review. If you did happen to read through a previous packet that was distributed, an easy way to know the difference between what you last read and what you see before you now is that anything that's been newly changed is in red markups. So this isn't markups, you know, so usually when you see markups in a document like this, it's according to the person who made the markup, so we haven't done that. We eliminated that specific information. Rather, this is just showing you the different phases in which we have made those recommended changes. I wanted to highlight how Title 16 is organized. There are a number of chapters. As you're familiar from being on the Planning Commission, you know that there's general provisions and then definitions, which just sort of set out the introduction of the title, and those are in different chapters to refer back to. And then right from there, it goes from roads to blocks and lots, section on plat and survey preparation. Then there's separate chapters on preliminary long plat and final long plat. There's a chapter on subdivision improvements, and then we have individual chapters as well on short plats, binding site plans, and so forth. We did not propose any changes to that structure. We thought we could just keep it intact. Probably could switch things around at some point, but it didn't seem really necessary to do. that right now and changed up the organization. So we've kept that general organization. In terms of regulatory changes, I just want you to know, we use a checklist that's provided from the Department of Commerce, and it identifies for counties and cities what the recent legislation has been that might impact what subdivision code has in it, so we try to pay attention to that. We're also mindful when we go through this about things that we've learned just in our day-to-day practice pertaining to like case law or decisions that have been made, or just from experience where we might know, certain phrases can be very troublesome, what can help the public to understand the process, what can help the Planning Commission through the process. These are the types of things that we're considering. We're looking at process improvements. So we're looking, like I said, ways to be more user-friendly, if you will, to the public and to subdividers. We want the code to be well understood. Generally, it's still municipal code. We can't make it completely like regular language, unfortunately. We try to really embrace the opportunity to make it as clear as possible, even though, as you know, it's a lot of information packed in. But that's one of the ideas behind the process improvements. We're also just looking for opportunities to make sure that the county is well positioned to process things, as I mentioned, in a timely manner, make sure that they have all the information that they would need to process an application. And the better and more well-written your code is, the better quality of applications you'll get in, because you can immediately go to someone at the beginning of the process and say, well, you haven't provided all the information that's in our code. And we need that so that we can do a good job processing your application. So that's part of the process improvement look as well. We've provided clarifications and expanded detail where possible, and I won't get too much into that. And then also just consistency in grammar is something we really tried to look at. When we needed to, we looked down at sentence structure, adding in some commas, just making typo corrections, things like that, just to clean things up as much as possible and avoid potential pitfalls and confusions in the future. I also want to mention that the county does use a codifier, so this would be adopted by ordinance. We've already put it into the code structure where it exists, but a codifier would be the person who'd actually go and make the changes that become official and become posted to the website. And the codifier will go through and they'll do the final changes if necessary to capitalization and things like that. So sometimes we don't always get the say on how that goes. They're following kind of a general set of rules on those types of things. Some key changes that I'm going to cover in the next couple slides. Frontage requirements for residential lots, individual wells, a discussion on that, number of allowable lots under short plats, and the fact that we're removing the specific fees from the code, suggesting that the county adopt a fee schedule instead. Now there's a whole lot more, but these are the key changes in terms of things that would maybe attract the attention of the public. And so I want to be sure that we're very clear on those proposed changes. So first, in terms of frontage requirements, we propose to reduce the frontage requirements along the street for residential lots to allow for more compact development and to provide flexibility. Now, as you might remember, the subdivision code is also used with the zoning code when we're looking at lot sizes, lot configuration, minimum lot width, bulk and dimensional requirements that would apply to future building, and so on and so forth. But it's interesting because when we get into the subdivision code itself, there is a specification about what a minimum lot dimension along the street needs to be for residential lots. And it works well if you're going to have very large lots. It does not work well when you're going to have more compact development in those urban growth areas, for example, in areas where we know that services can be provided, such as sewer, because they're in the urban growth area. So we want to make that modification to allow a more compact development and that flexibility where needed. There could also be infill situations where we're trying to, someone wants to subdivide some property and They may not be starting from kind of a perfectly shaped parcel to begin with, and so allowing some flexibility on that minimum frontage standards is really key. And I think this came up just not long ago in the department. I do want to highlight, this doesn't affect density. Density is still driven by the zoning code. So we're not saying that folks can have more lots per acre with this change. What we're saying is that when we're looking at the configuration of lots themselves, when we bring in a subdivision application, we aren't going to be so, we're not going to require as much frontage width as we did before. This is our proposal so that different situations can be handled. Derek?
Just a prime example of this is we have zones in our code that you've never seen on a map because we don't actually have them all mapped, but they're actually urban scale zones. And there could be a circumstance or situation where these would be applied. However, it would be impossible for them to meet the frontage requirements of 90 feet because the property, a 12,000 square foot lot effectively cannot, I mean, you can do it, but it actually almost can create a situation where you got the frontage, but you can't build on the lot now because it's not deep enough. And then, so not having these different definitions, but just as Nicole stated, the actual density, the amount in the lot minimum dimensions are as prescribed in each specific zone, not this. This is just if in these generalizations, so.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll mention, we're not doing away completely with those minimum lot dimensions, but what we are is we're like fine tuning them a little bit better so that they can apply to different situations. So we're saying if a lot, for example, is already smaller to begin with, let's say less than 12,000 square feet, and you haven't seen anything like that yet, but you could, the minimum frontage should be 45 feet, whereas previously they would have had to have 90 feet in that situation, so makes a lot more sense. Just as a for example. So I see this as being, again, something that's notable, but at the same time, everyone can stay rest assured that density will still be driven by the zoning, and so it's not until we get to a situation where we have one of those floating zones assigned to a property, if you will, that you would see this. Next, we added some information about individual wells. And I worked really hard with Rick Dawson over at the Health District to improve that area, that section that we wrote. It's a new chapter that we're proposing, and it's been significantly revised since we last provided it. And so I just wanted to highlight that basically it just identifies that if a development's going to go in and there's going to be individual wells, we're just promulgating here what are those state requirements that they need to adhere to, and then what are the local health district rules that they need to adhere to. And then we're also making it very clear about how exemptions work in Washington State. For example, the code would just recite that a groundwater permit exemption allows users of small quantities of groundwater to construct wells and develop their water supplies without first obtaining a water right permit from Ecology. So we're just reciting what's true in the state law today. And next, if water supply is to be provided by a groundwater withdrawal that's exempt from permitting under RCW, so on and so forth, it says the applicant has to comply with certain things. And again, it's just referring back to state law. So we just want to have that in there kind of as an information piece and to guide developers in Franklin County so they know what the situation is with respect to exempt wells. If you go back to the comprehensive plan that you recently recommended approval on updating, and then it was approved by the Board of County Commissioners, you might remember we had some discussion in that comprehensive plan relating to groundwater and how Franklin County is not subject to in-stream water rules, which makes us unique and distinct from, say, development that occurs in Yakima or the western part of Benton County. And so that allows us to have this in our code. And so I think it's nice to kind of get that piece in there. So that's why we're proposing that.
What's an example of an exempt well?
Well, you've had some subdivision applications come in recently, and you've had wells that have gone on the property where people can it's called an exempt well because it's exempt from permitting through ecology in terms of showing a certificated water right. So the state law says if I have a home site and there aren't other rules to prevent me from doing so, I can have a well and I can irrigate up to half an acre a day. I can use it for domestic water use up to, I think, 6,000 gallons per day. It's some 5,000 gallons per day.
And that's total.
Total.
Including irrigation.
Yeah, and for stock watering purposes, right? So there's certain provisions in the state law, and it says that I don't have to have a water right first in order to do that. You run into trouble, as I said, in different parts of the state with this, but in the Hearst decision was something that we talked about some time ago. Yeah, but fortunately, Franklin County is not subject to in-stream water rules, and so for that reason, we can still allow exempt permits to continue on as long as the state rules are adhered to.
In-stream water rules.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that has to do with tribes
Yeah.
and salmon and
Right.
drawing down the water table,
Right.
and everything's hydraulically connected
Yeah.
and all of that kind of stuff that's kind of beyond me, but that's my general understanding of how it all
Well, I know
works.
it's a huge thing that started in Bellingham, I think.
Correct.
Originally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's nice for Franklin County.
We'll take what we can get.
But I think putting this in the code would be helpful to sort of put people on notice as to what you can do here, but that you also have to fall into, these provisions. And that also gives the county teeth then if somebody is trying to do something that's beyond what they should otherwise be allowed to do with an exempt well permit and say, look, it's in our code. You have to comply with the RCW. We can't let you around that kind of a thing. So, interesting topic, and we think it should be woven into the code here. Groundwater is a super important topic when it comes to subdivision. The next one, I'll be brief on this one. For a short plat, right now you can have 4 lots at a short plat anywhere in the county, and we're proposing that this could be changed. We're proposing that within the urban growth areas, we think folks could get up to 9 lots with the short plat. That is the maximum amount of lots that you could get with a short plat per state law, and it's up to the localities, to come up with, what those thresholds are. So again, we're suggesting if you're not in an urban growth area, it would remain at 4. Nothing would really change on that. If you have 5 or more lots, you're going to have to go through the preliminary plat process. But if you've got up to 9, again, in the UGA, you would not be required to go through the preliminary plat process. You could do a short plat. I think this is more friendly to developers. There are some controls or review that would be lost. As you can well imagine, you might see fewer plats come to the Planning Commission because then when they're a short plat, they're administratively reviewed. So there could be a consequence with this, and they wouldn't be subject to a public hearing, for example. So the process is different. It is a kind of a give and take in terms of the benefits and then potential risk for things that could be less open to scrutiny, I guess, or great review. Any questions on that before I move on, or comments?
That may actually be current. I believe we already allow for 9-lot short plats. in the
Did you
UGA.
change your code?
So I'm trying to remember now.
Maybe you changed your code, but not your SEPA. I'm gonna look real quick.
It doesn't, regardless, this makes, I can't remember now. Maybe that had to do with the SEPA requirements. Triggers. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. We'll talk later. I'm
So
sorry.
one thing we'll want to be certain of is that we also change the SEPA regulations and those categorical exemption thresholds to match what you have in your subdivision code. And yeah, my memory's not tuned into that right now, but that is something that definitely would want to make sure that those are kind of married up, if you will. They don't have to be, but they really ought to be. Okay, and then finally, fee schedule. We're not recommending any changes to the fees right now, but fees should probably be looked at. It's been some time since any of the fees were changed for applications, and there's a cost to review things. If the applicant is not bearing the burden, then it goes to the taxpayers, of course. So we want to look at fees and that sort of thing. But what for today, what we're talking about in terms of our proposed Title 16 changes is to just take the fees listing out of the code. It'd be fine for the county to adopt a resolution, something that would go through the Board of County Commissioners, that could be modified as frequently as need be to change fees and to identify any additional fees that could be missing. One reason why it's really helpful to get that out of your municipal code is because anytime you touch Title 16 or any of the other development regulations, it is subject to a 60-day notice requirement through the state. It goes to State Department of Commerce, and then they vet it through the other agencies. So it's a process, right? So anytime you want to change your fees, do you want to always have to wait 60 days to do it so that Department of Commerce knows about it and WashDOT knows about it? Probably not. You know, ecology.
And fee schedules are usually based on, so you have to do a fiscal analysis. So you have to first show if you're looking to leave everything the same, then you don't need to do all of what I'm getting ready to say. But if you're looking to change them, so you have to look at your hourly rate, of staff time. You have to track how long does it take to do stuff. Then you put all that together. Then you make the proposal. Usually, most municipalities, in fact, I'm not aware of a single municipality that actually charges actual cost. So you have to bake that into your fees too. So let's say it costs me $100 to do, or we'll say all said and done with mailings, everything, like it's $750, man hours, everything, for a short plat. But we charge like $400. Or situations, so that's not unusual, to where we'll charge a reduced amount because the citizens are paying taxes as well. So you want to kind of think about, they're already making a continual contribution to everybody's plat. These types of things. So staff will propose and make a recommendation as to what it thinks are the fees. That would be vetted through the auditor and various other agencies as well. And then that would go to the board for approval or modification or whatever. Often too, what you'll do is if you see that you're going to be doing a significant increase, like say 100%, you're doubling your fees and stuff. Often what you'll do is you'll do it over a 2-year period. So in year 1, it's a 50% increase. Year 2, so that people have time to kind of ramp up to it. Other jurisdictions don't do that, but that would be my recommendation. A lot of our fees are pretty archaic. For example, a $150 SEPA fee doesn't even pay for the mailing, doesn't even pay for the advertising. So, and we haven't even started talking about man hours spent, materials used, and things like that. Some of our other fees are pretty on really close to what's average. Most jurisdictions charge for the processing of a final plat because there's actually work for that. So you do the preliminary, you get it all ready to go, then you submit it. Well, for example, this is a prime example where we don't charge a fee. We don't charge a fee for a final plat. However, it's submitted to the department reviews it, sends it out for agency review and comment to make sure, hey, is it ready for signature? We do all of that, then we also take it to the board, we prepare the staff report and everything for the final. There's a lot of work actually involved, and we don't charge nothing for it.
As a quick,
What's that?
You get it back in building permits.
Building permits are actually set by a whole different metric that we have. And again, we are on the low side of building permit fees.
And that was kind of the meaning of my question, is we may be on the low side, but
It's volume.
because it's taxpayer, it's what am I paying for? Because I can go pay for a building permit, and I'm not saying necessarily Franklin County. I can go pay for a building permit, which gives me this many inspections.
Mhm.
But then I have to wait 3 or 4 or 5 days for an inspection, which slows the project down.
Those are different animals. The second one has to do with volume versus staffing. There's only so many hours in the day. You know, like when we got hit with 10 weeks worth of applications in 48 hours. Nothing I can really do except for still kind of process
So that
them
part
as fast as we.
That doesn't fall underneath our purview, right?
Fees would not, and staffing levels would not. That's purely a thing of the
I
board.
just watched the city of Pasco, developers over here waiting a week and a half for a sewer inspection, and on day 32, Amazon standing still. So,
Then that's called expedited project review, I hope. And we don't have that process, and some jurisdictions do, where you pay an extra fee and you get to jump the head of the line. I personally feel that's fundamentally wrong.
yes, it is.
So I'm not saying we won't ever see it, but it won't be because of my recommendation.
Just have that.
First in line, first out the door.
so just to punctuate a little bit and reiterate, the idea about taking the fees out of the development code is to improve the process. This is an administrative decision, can be set by the Board of County Commissioners, and so we just don't want that process to be slowed up by having to notify the state, basically. So take it out of the code, makes things better. I just also wanted to point out with some of the issues that that Derek brought up, with a final plat application, I would prefer to see you bring in a fee, even if it's a nominal fee, so that someone can say, look, I paid my check, this is the date I got the application in, right? If it's just a submittal, but it doesn't come with a fee, there's no receipt, it can be really hard for purposes of knowing like processing days and everything that we have to do under the Local Project Review Act to be certain of how many days we're using to process it. So I think it's helpful to the department and the applicant to kind of have that formality attached to it. Again, even if it's just a nominal amount, it's nice to have a fee that ties that application so that it's clear, when it was accepted. Okay, and I'll move on from that now. So that was really what I wanted to highlight, and then we can go back and discuss anything that you may have noticed or you have questions about. In terms of our next steps with this, the intent for this evening was to introduce you to these changes, help you to become as familiar as you'd like to be with the proposed changes. We can do another planning commission workshop. I think Derek mentioned his desire to do that with the public component, so we would accept public comment. And then, of course, this would need to go to a public hearing before this board. Once you're ready to make a recommendation, it would go on to the Board of County Commissioners. They could hold their own public hearing. They wouldn't be required to, but I would kind of expect that they would. And then they can adopt an ordinance. This is a legislative item, so it's not set to a certain schedule, nor are we limited to the number of meetings that you want to have, including public hearings. And as opposed to quasi-judicial projects like rezones, preliminary plats, conditional use permits, you don't have to worry about disclosing ex parte communication or anything like that. You can talk to anyone freely from the development community, find out what they think about it, take input as a planning commissioner. So I just wanted to make that very clear as well. Just to make things kind of as accessible as possible. We did put everything into a quick 2-page summary, so you have a summary of those proposed changes. We've also highlighted some things that would need to happen when new codes are adopted. For example, the county application forms will probably have to be looked at, and maybe some revisions made to make sure that any of the documents you're using to administer subdivisions and plats reflect the updated code. We're keeping an eye on what Pasco is doing in terms of their subdivision code to see if they make changes we want to reasonably line up. Let me see if there's anything else. And then there's just other good stuff that we mixed in that I didn't put a slide together for. But for example, one thing we want to add in here is, hey, you can get an exemption from the code if there's a division of land that occurs because of dedicated public right-of-way. State code allows us to do that. Let's work that in. That would make sense for folks. Take that burden off of people. Sometimes we see these lots and they've already been bifurcated by the right-of-way. If that's already occurred, then there's no reason to not allow for a parcel segregation, right? It just makes sense. So those types of things. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I can pull up the code, whatever you would like at this point.
So you just covered a couple highlights. All this pink stuff are changes.
Yes.
Okay, so are we going to go over more changes, or is that all we're going to go over?
That's what you said. If there's, those are the highlights. If there's anything in particular that you're curious about.
I mean, I can go page by page, but I just...
Who wrote all these add-ons? Like on the first page, that's the first one I came to, we ended at J before and it goes all the way to Q. Who added all that?
I added that.
So
This,
the first one I saw, I don't like. I don't like J. I think the old J was great. I don't like the new J at all. Do we get a vote on this, or how does it work?
well, of course, no, I'm like to hear your feedback. So just to explain the process here, we did go through, as I mentioned, a checklist. We looked at kind of best practices or just things that like, hey, it feels like something's missing here, right? We just based on, again, our roles.
I guess I'd be curious what.
Working for lots of jurisdictions and working here in Franklin County. We have that experience to draw on. So we put this together, we gave it to Derek, he routed it out to his staff. Following that, we sent it out to agencies, like the Public Works Department has seen this, the Health District has seen this. So it's been vetted to an extent, but it's ready for your review and your feedback. So we want to hear, I don't want this changed, or this looks good. We want that direction.
What is your issue with?
My issue is, we're here to build things and make the city bigger. That's what happens here, period. I keep running into this. We want to keep open spaces and farmlands. Well, that's not a city. A city is closed spaces, and the city goes onto farmlands. That's what we have. I just hate to be restricted in all these special farmlands that we can't build on.
Okay.
The owners will restrict us if they don't want it.
Yeah, I mean,
That's state.
we have an obligation under the Growth Management Act to protect farmland.
We would know, because that's what our whole expansion was. It was a bunch of farmland.
Yeah.
We're
So,
using farmland.
correct, but you got the whole county we're talking about. So these subdivision regulations, they apply countywide. This is for everything in Franklin County. So this is out in past Altopia, to the far reaches, near Palouse Falls, all the county. So if somebody comes in and they want to do an agricultural short plat, this type of language could apply. Encourage a creative approach in the development of land while ensuring retention of open spaces and farmlands.
And I kind of see what you're saying, maybe. Are we making the farmer on the outskirts of Washita follow the same rules as the guy down on Road 40? Because our urban growth boundary is farmland.
It's what it is.
Right. So,
When you put verbiage in there saying ensuring the retention and usage, what does that mean?
Yeah, and this is a purpose statement, so it's actually unusual to have this type of language in a code, but what it's supposed to do is set the tone. But if you prefer just to say, hey, all of our goals and policies are in the comprehensive plan and not to take this detail here, we could certainly do
I
that.
just don't want to give a bureaucrat that sentence.
I got you.
No, I don't either. I don't see the point to it. I really don't.
Let me ask you this. Would you be interested in retaining perhaps O, which says provide predictability so landowners can make appropriate and reasonable use of their land?
I think that's not an unneeded one also.
Unneeded, okay.
They can sell it or not sell it.
Well, okay, hold on, if I may.
Landowners can't trump state law.
Let me, yeah,
That's kinda what-
you're mixing some things here.
I wanna
because
hear it. Let's hear it.
We have a statutory obligation under state law in the Growth Management Act to protect farmland, okay? We also have a bunch of other things that we have to do simultaneously that sometimes conflict with these things. They conflict with each other. So we need to provide growth, but at the same time, we have an obligation to protect designated farmland.
Who gets to decide
Who gets to decide what?
What farmland gets used and doesn't get
It comes
used.
down to zoning.
Well, I would say right now, the appeals court, when they give us a ruling on our growth management hearings board.
Okay, so is this another one of those deals like we went through with your growth deal? We sat here for hours and hours and hours, read through everything, started to make changes. Well, you can't really.
And had no
because
say in it.
The Department of Ecology has this.
Yeah, if we don't have a say in it.
It's just because the Army Corps of Engineers says this.
Yeah.
So is this all BS?
The-
We're
the-
just going through a formality?
The way, okay, so would you want permit flexibility that will encourage a more creative approach to development of lands?
What's that now?
The first half of the sentence. Or do you agree with that?
Say that again?
Yeah, I don't think that makes any sense. Permit flexibility that encourages more, what's creative? I don't want to be creative. I don't like art. I don't like creative anything. I like the J that was there.
Then you're gonna set yourself up for situations. We cannot predict everything that's gonna come across.
Perfect, and that's why we can't think we're gonna predict it. We deal with it when it comes to us. Just-
If you're gonna put a word like creative in there.
Yeah, what is,
It's the difference as some art critic looking at a piece of art saying that's one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Remember,
say-
these-
I can see where you'd be uncomfortable with some of this. What I could suggest is, this is just page 1. Maybe once we get to the end of looking at the subdivision code, maybe some of this could make more sense and could be more reasonable. Maybe we can revisit this.
These are broad kind
Yeah.
of
I know,
statements
but
at this
broad ends
point.
up in the process of becoming
No.
very detailed.
and unnecessary,
And that's what the
unnecessary.
rest of this does, is supposed to flesh out how these goals apply, would actually be implemented. So that's all I'm saying is, before we critique too much of this, I would almost say this is the easiest for us to play with, but not until we've looked at everything and have an understanding of what we're actually saying. See, that's what the rest of this document kind of does, it's supposed to articulate these things. I do understand the fear and maybe some of these,
Definition of creative is.
there's some of these terminologies we may need to tweak, because exactly, if it's too subjective, that's a potential issue. Sometimes you just stuck with the limitations of the English language. Other times,
But,
we
okay,
may
just,
be able to find a better way of wording.
but this
that
first
thing.
statement just, we're gonna protect farmland, that would just take our whole urban growth boundary that we just did away.
Okay.
We're not protecting
so
it, we're using
then-
it, we're gonna
then
burn through it.
What we have, maybe something like.
It makes no sense.
Maybe, because you have to remember, we have these things that come from the state that tell us this is the best way, and we're using sometimes their terminology.
Right, so this.
So
sentence right here-
maybe not open spaces and farmlands, maybe it's designated open spaces and designated farm, agricultural, which, all text.
Well, yeah.
You
And
know,
here's-
and get
This
very
seems like a statement
specific.
to make FutureWise happy, and I'm not interested.
Yeah.
No.
Here's what I can offer to do.
Don't think we are operating in that mental thought
But the state
process.
might be, if, like I said, if we have to do it, just tell
Well,
us and we won't
no,
waste your time.
like I said,
But if we have any say in it, we're
it's-
gonna put our say in.
Farmlands the reality is what we're mandated by the state to protect are alt text, agricultural lands of long-term commercial significance. Those are designated by us. Or,
Apparently not, because we have some that we didn't designate and we don't like. I've been dealing with this for a long time.
which is why we did what we did with 14 and the countywide planning policies to actually set up a process that allows a party to de-designate the land. I can't speak to what happened in the past. I can only say what I have today and looking forward and how to make things, because our code before is a rural code. That's what it was. It was designed, implemented, and worked wonderfully when Franklin County was 90% rural.
Is it, so we're urban now?
It's not that we're urban now. It's that we have new things. We didn't have suburbs. We do now. We have the donut holes, which are effectively suburbs. We have the shoreline area, which is effectively suburbs. Then we have what's going on in the UGA, and the intent of the UGA. The UGA is to develop to an urban level. Well, how do we do that when we don't have the codes in place to allow us to do that? That said, we have to, so we have, in some of these, you're going to find our modifications, maybe, of the countywide planning policies to some, I mean, like the language usage. You'll find these things mirrored in our comp plan and our adoption. So the specific language, I can see, okay, creative. Okay, what do we mean by that? We'll have to figure that out or eliminate the word.
Right.
Farmland, maybe we need to change that from a broad term, which is a potential issue, to a specific, because we have to protect the all-tech properties or go through a formal de-designation process. So maybe that's what we do. And again, open space, well, what's the definition of open space? Designated open space is maybe as defined by the tax assessment valuation on the property. Fleshing these things out may be a benefit as opposed to elimination. Because what I got when I read this is that we're trying to open up ways and come up with flexible ideas like the innovative short plat to figure out ways for, let's look at our, like, for example, our ADU policies on accessory dwelling unit. I got 50 acres, but I can only have one house. And no, that's not quite right. You can, depending on the situation. But, it's these types of things and looking at those. But at the same time, we do have a need and an obligation to protect the farmland. Why? Because if it all turns to asphalt, we ain't eating anything.
But that's,
But that's a long way. But again, what I said is extreme. That's an extreme statement. Obviously, the county is not going to turn, not in our lifetimes, probably not our grandchildren's lifetime, into all concrete.
It almost seems like we have two issues here. One is how to develop that area within the urban growth boundary
Exactly.
this way.
And then there's the rest of
the open space.
That's right.
But back in the day, before the Growth Management Act, it was a wild, wild west out in
That's
Franklin
right.
County.
Mhm.
And that's how these Lamberts, I live in one,
Mhm.
was created.
Mhm.
And to go back to that is crazy because you have anybody call up and say, I want to develop my land. And they just go out there and do their thing. And it didn't work out.
But-
Because you have farmers come in and they hated it.
but I totally agree with that. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm after. I just know there's a Lambert right on the edge of the urban growth boundary. I have farmed that piece of ground. It's a piece of crap. It is not a land of significance. It should have never been designated that. And to have little pockets in our city is ridiculous. And say what you want, everything that gets developed from Burbank to Findlay to Pasco is farmland. Putting these ridiculous words that make everybody feel warm and fuzzy do nothing. We are developing farmland, period. That's what we do.
Right.
That's what we do.
But Derek, you basically, the limitation is when you zone something like AP20. I mean, there's only so much that there's only so far somebody can develop that.
There you go.
AP20.
That's a useful limit
You're not
right
going to come in
there.
and change the zoning on it. That's what it is.
Right, but you're talking specifics this is not.
This is a
specific.
generality, yeah, I don't like that generality.
I'm beyond the UGA.
But the purpose statements are always general like that. I mean, prevent the overcrowding of land. You agree with that, right?
Say that again.
Prevent the overcrowding of land.
What
Right.
definition of overcrowding do we get to use, the bureaucrat or the landowner?
Well,
It's already zoned.
well,
Yeah, what's overcrowding?
If it's, you're not gonna change the zoning on it.
goals or purpose statements are broad.
Right.
And then, like I said, the rest of the document is supposed to flesh that out for you. And if at the end, we still don't know the answer to these questions, I'm not saying anybody here is right or anybody here is wrong. I'm just saying so what I'm hearing is concerns with the generalities associated with the purpose.
I haven't even read this thing, I haven't seen this till today. I'm sure we got an email to us, didn't we? I didn't see it. But the first thing I started to read, I didn't like.
Because from what I'm getting is you don't like broad statements. You want specifics.
So I'll pick the first
No.
one I saw, is L, provide incentives to landowners who wish to protect and preserve certain identified lands. What the hell does that mean?
Just don't sell your land.
Yeah.
That's,
So
yeah.
am I as a taxpayer gonna give some kind of an incentive to a landowner to not develop?
Yes, you are. Yes.
I don't like that.
No, I don't like that either.
Now, when you say as a taxpayer, are you using any taxes or?
Any taxes,
Or
yes.
any money from the government? I mean, it could be
I don't want anybody
nonprofits.
from the government paying the landowner not to develop.
No.
it.
Nuh-uh.
What- Who gets to decide incentives?
Who
What's the
said
word incentive
who
mean?
said the incentives were gonna be money?
It doesn't say. That's my point, is what kind of incentives are you talking about?
Every incentive is money when it comes down to the bottom line.
All right.
How to explain this?
I want to point something out here. So Jay originally said implement the goals, objectives, and policies of the Franklin County Comprehensive Plan. We still have it. We moved it up. We listed it first here because the purpose is to regulate division of land and implement those goals, policies, and objectives. The rest of the language is boilerplate. It's what you're going to see in other codes. This is something that some counties use, the rest of this language that's all been added in our proposed document. Some of them don't. I could see a lawyer being like, no, I don't want you to have this in here. Go read the comprehensive plan, that's where all of this kind of stuff belongs, right? So, let's come back to this later, but point taken
Yep.
about questioning it. Everything else is going to be really dry, so we can come back to that discussion if we need to.
This
I
is
wanna
probably
make
the
sure-
first thing I'm actually gonna read in a long time.
Please do. And wait till you get the zoning code. You better read that because that's where the
I've just
rubber
very
meets
rarely
the
ever
road.
seen
Yeah.
some improvement like this ever make it actually freer or easier.
Right.
We're just adding
You never
layers
take
to
away
it.
regulations. You're always adding them, right? That's the concern. Well,
We'll see.
Are we gonna talk about this again, or are we done with this? Are we gonna
Oh,
be
yeah.
zoning next time?
No, zoning ain't coming to you. We may not even get.
So we're gonna talk about this again.
as long as you need to before you
Yeah.
feel ready for a public
You're
hearing.
not in any rush.
That's
Are
why
you
I
gonna
put
go
the
over
date on the
different-
version too, is because you might, next time we get together, we might have a different version, you know what I'm saying? We want to keep improving this till we get it right. Hold public hearing, get it to the board.
Zoning, discussion.
Me too.
I mean, I do hope that we can move
Seriously.
along so that we can get to zoning. We have to do critical areas, all of that kind of stuff. It's a heavy lift, all of this type of work.
I just, like on what we've been talking about here is if we're gonna say something,
Yeah.
let's say something. Don't just reiterate it in a different way.
Understood. Okay. So I mentioned a little bit about exemptions. There's nothing significant here except changing the word of to or, as it should have been. Divisions or acquisitions of land pursuant to condemnation or threat of condemnation by a government agency for public purposes. So that could be, for example, you've got a 100-acre parcel out there and the state is doing, oh, I know, they're going to expand State Park and they need additional land for a parking lot. This would let them not have to go through the short plat process like we did a couple years ago. So that's an example right there. So that's lightening the regulations, right? We're giving a new exemption if we accept that language. For G, the division of land due to an intervening dedicated public road right-of-way that's on the 6-year TIP. So again, where a road's going in, we don't want to have 1 acre that's now bifurcated by the road and it's in 2 pieces and Al still has 1 parcel number. If the landowner says, I just would rather have these be 2 separate parcels now, county went and built a road in between, I should have 2 pieces, they can go and do that without having to pay for a short plat. And then in any division of land for the purpose of installation, maintenance of power, telephone, and so forth, provided that it still, works with the zoning code. We don't want to create a non-conforming situation, but if it's all going to work out, we should let them do that. So these are 3 areas right here where we are actually taking some regulations out, right? We're giving people an out from the short platting or platting process.
But you don't gotta sell us on this. Let's just read these and go.
I'm going to celebrate it for a
Okay,
second.
that's
Let's
good.
move
We
on.
have some common ground, okay? We'll scream when we don't like it, don't
Okay.
worry.
I really don't want to go through the definitions unless there's anything in particular that catches your eye and you're going, what's this all about?
One question. The
Yeah.
difference with- So it used to say uniform building code, now it says international building code. What's the difference?
Because one, we have to follow the uniform building code. We don't use, the only uniform code we use is the plumbing code, the state, and we use the IBC, International Building Code. The entire state's required to use the IBC. Now, we can add to that, but we can't go below that. So that's just, frankly, I don't know when we started, but that probably should have been updated quite a while ago. If our code said uniform, the state hasn't used the uniform building code since I started my
I just
career.
get nervous whenever I see international.
Okay, I'm going to say this because I've said it a million times in other meetings. The International Building Code is an American code created by Americans, for Americans, and the reason it's called international is they're trying to get the rest of the world to adopt it. It does not come from the outside. It comes from here. It was created by, for Americans, for America, and we're trying, the fact they put international on it, I've just been asked that so many times. No, it does not come from China, it does not come from the UN, it does not come from anywhere, it came from America. I apologize, but yeah, that was, it seems to be,
We do.
it seems to be a common misperception about that international code, and it's just like, no, that's an American code. We're trying to get the rest of the world to adopt it, not the other way around.
All right, this brings us to chapter 12, or 16.12, roads. I've just done some wordsmithing is all, until we get down to rural lot access, I believe. Let me make sure that's where I've headed. Whoops, went a little too far. Oh, cul-de-sacs. It says cul-de-sacs permitted where topography or other conditions justify their use. And then going down to subsection 2, it says every cul-de-sac needs to have a turnaround with a minimum blah, blah, blah. And then we're writing and/or international fire code standards adopted by the county. Which means that if you can show I'm meeting the international fire code standards, we'll leave you alone, right?
It's pretty much how we do it anyways.
Yeah.
If the fire district signs off on a deviation, we go, okay. So,
If it meets the fire code, then it meets what we need. Blocks and lots. This is where we get into like, oh, you know, your lots should be a certain size, and this is all about kind of creating some general uniformity, which, you know, sometimes we don't like subdivisions to be cookie cutter, of course, but we do want some organization. We want a pleasing environment, and so we're trying to create an environment for that. So in general, we don't want really long block lengths. We're trying to control for these types of things. When we move down to the minimum lot dimensions for residential lots, this is the area I briefed you on earlier, where we're going to look at these frontage requirements, and we're adding a new category. Because it used to just say lots that are greater than 25,000 square feet, lots that have fewer than 25,000 square feet. And we went add in another category, lots that have fewer than 12,000 square feet, they can get away with a smaller road frontage.
So what's the reason for frontage?
So as Derek mentioned, there are some zones that are in your zoning code that aren't actually on the map right now, but it's possible that someone who's in an urban growth area could come in and say, I want, I don't even know what it's called, RM or RL, 10,000 or 10 or whatever it is, and they want 10,000 square foot lots. And it's in the urban growth area, it's gonna be connected to sewer, why wouldn't we let them do that type of a development if it's appropriate for the area? You know, if it passes all the other requirements. So we need to make sure that our code has that flexibility to allow that type of development, because if we're like, oh, you could do it except we have this silly road frontage requirement because we didn't ever conceive that we'd have these smaller lots, then we've really backed ourselves into a corner. So this is just
I guess what my question is so on a lot smaller than 12,000 square feet,
still gonna have to have a minimum of 45.
so
Yeah.
on one bigger than 25,000, you gotta have 60 feet. Why the difference? Why aren't they all just the same? Why aren't they all just 45?
Because then there's two reasons, in my opinion. One, you start getting into that lot. Remember, we also have the second layout requirement, length and depth, no more than, width shall be no less than, or the length shall not be more than 3 times the width. So that's part of it, is you start getting into some really weird things if you've got just one lot size, frontage. You could have a minimum, but that's going to create some I can already see where, like, say you just have a minimum, 45 feet. Yeah, that's not going to work. Standard urban lot in most jurisdictions is somewhere between 45 and 60 feet. A 60-foot lot's going to give you, on a 6,000 square foot minimum lot size, that's, 60 by 100 foot lot, but you can generally fit, 2 to 3,000 square foot home on that, depending on how you've laid it out and things like that. That's tight, that's urban, that's really tight development. But when you start looking at, if you just start drawing the boxes and you start playing with it, you'll start to see how when you start doing that frontage requirement.
What is the frontage? What's the purpose of the frontage?
I can answer that. So this effectively helps to prevent flag lots, or if you think about like a curved road when they want to do like a bunch of pie-shaped lots, this kind of puts some controls on things. But I'll also scroll down here because there is a waiver possibility.
Yeah.
If it's a short plat and Derek's telling them, well, you have to have a road frontage, and they're like, well, you have to say that because you're administrating the code, but we'd rather go convince the board that we want to do something else, then there is a provision for them to go get a waiver.
And I guess that was my question, is what's the purpose of the frontage?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that term, so what is it?
Right, it's just about what part of the lot connects to the road, and truly, I mean,
It's aesthetics and.
engineers will try to draw things any way that they can get it in, right? And it's to keep it kind of like nice, right? Pleasing, and so you don't have this long driveway. You could have like 4 long driveways and they all go to a different house because they're all like flag lots on each other, right? That's what we're trying to avoid,
Go to North Idaho, there.
is something
Well,
screwy.
And it also starts getting into your setback requirements that are in place for fire safety between separations of buildings. You start getting too narrow, you can't fit anything on the property. And one of our things is, we don't allow non-buildable lots unless those lots are being utilized for, say, a tract, for example, stormwater retention or something like that. And that's why you'll see tracts, that's what that usually indicates. If you see a tract A and then lots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, tract A is usually some part of an infrastructure system or a park or something like that. It's not for building. So that's the other, you just start running into these things. People will slam these buildings up. I mean, where a developer can save money is by cramming in units. And the more you can shove in there, so you need to maintain some of those separations unless you're going through zero lot lines. There's other
Boise,
options.
Idaho's got 4,000, I've seen 4,000 square foot lots
Oh, yeah.
set out there, and but all the houses are all 2-story and they're all the same.
Yeah, Airway Heights had 6,000 was the smallest lot size, but if you did a duplex, that was zero lot line, allowing for individual lots. Each side had to be a minimum of 3,000 square foot. City of Spokane, I think, goes down to 4,500 in certain areas. And all the way up, from there. So,
These types of controls really do have a good impact on community character when you're talking about maintaining community
I
character.
think it's beneficial to Franklin County,
Yeah,
is what it is, because it has a better look to it.
yeah.
And you jam these, the challenge on these, that I see in the frontages and the cul-de-sacs, you've got a radius, so you've got a trapezoid type lot or a triangular type lot,
Yeah,
and you're limited, but if you maintain a certain lot size, a certain frontage and everything else,
yeah.
yes, better, I don't know.
And you think about
More room.
cases of street parking, right? If everybody
Yeah.
just has one driveway and the driveways are right next to each other, there's no
Well,
place to
you've got
park a car,
emergency
you've got a
vehicles that
problem.
gotta get in and out of there too.
Yeah, yeah.
And all that.
and I've also seen on like cul-de-sacs, it's like minimum of 35 feet provided, the frontage, where the house lays, the actual front of the house, that's a minimum of, say, 60 feet. I've seen those type too, to where they're like, yeah, you can have that narrow thing, provided you've set the building back far enough that, these types, so these can be tweaked or very specific if we want. And this is where I'd said suburban before. When I was referencing that's the UGA. That area is supposed to be able to be developed at an urban scale, providing services are available, all services. However, our code didn't have any accommodation for developing that way, but yet they develop under our jurisdiction until such time as the area is annexed. And it's rare, as they say, urban lands are to be annexed or within urban areas or city UGAs. The UGA for future growth, we're supposed to be trying to make sure that area develops to that scale before the city annexes it, because their whole system is designed around providing urban services. Our whole system is designed around providing rural services. And though similar, they're very different. The distance, big reason they don't want to deal with the donut hole is because you've got large lots. I run infrastructure down the road, and I'm serving 10 lots because there's 1 acre lots, whereas in their jurisdiction, they're serving 60 lots. So they're actually getting a return on, they're able to take that infrastructure cost and spread it out. Because for them to put in that thing for 10 people to pay, and it's $1 million project, and they're each in it for what, 10,000? You do it with 60 people, now we're down to actually a potentially feasible number that you can afford to do as a little bump on your water bill or something like that, which is often how that's done. But, we don't have water and sewer, so that makes it even more, it can get, well, we've
But
had
as we know, the city can extend their sewer, so there could be those services. They're
Once
just not
that
from
happens.
the county. Yeah.
I
But,
think that's part of the problem. We don't, because there's people that don't need the service, they don't want services.
oh, I know,
They didn't ask
there's,
for it.
there's
Right.
always people that
But that-
either want what is to maintain, or they want change, and they're usually next door to one another.
That was just when we had this discussion with Pasco, when they were on, as far as they would take services out, but they want to make sure that they can, they want their, they want to stack more houses in those areas.
That's
Or-
exactly right. The city
Or they
wants
don't
more
want
tax
to run sewer out to half-acre lots. They want to be able to go in there and,
And the city wants more tax revenue.
yeah.
All right, I'm going to keep us moving because I think that's part of my job here. And keep the conversation moving. So I'm going to move down now to chapter 16.18, plat and survey preparation. That's on page 10. This is all new. This is basically promulgating some requirements for how surveys need to be put together. It's nothing earth-shattering. It's really just saying we need you to tie to monuments, use state plane coordinates. It's talking about what the state law is. It's basically just memorializing kind of what should already probably have been in the code or added to the code at some point. It's just, we're closing a gap, if you will. For example, if we look at item C, it says all tracks, open spaces, and easements must be properly identified with the purpose stated. That's just a good practice for plats. I mean, you need that information. When we look at old plats that leave us guessing what an easement is, it doesn't help anybody. So that's the purpose of this section here. Let me think, what else? It also sets out, specific language that needs to be put on here for public dedications, and that's going to help so that in using sort of a uniform language that will appear on plats about dedications, that's going to make sure that things don't slip by the department or slip by the county where things should have maybe been written a little bit differently. So the comfort level with that, I'm hoping okay. I see heads nodding. Okay. Cool. Next is that section that I spoke to already, long plats and short plats with individual wells. I did scrap the original version of this. The health department or health district was like, whoa, that's not going to work. So we have a new version that we worked with them on, which you see here. Basically, as I mentioned before, we're adopting state regulations, we're putting in the health district rules, and then we're just talking in general terms about exempt wells. Again, kind of filling the gap because right now the code is silent to this issue, and we want to make sure that we are providing this information to subdividers and to help county reviewers remember that these types of things need to be considered and looked at. There's really nothing too strong language here. Again, it's just kind of referring to state law, state code, which I think is helpful, especially as we've said, the regulatory environment is getting increasingly complex, not less complicated. So if we can provide citations and point people in the right directions when they might have questions about these things, all the better. Okay. Preliminary long plat, we're changing that name, if you're comfortable with that. Throughout the code right now, it just talks about preliminary plats, final plats, and then it talks about short plats. And it's customary in some places to call them long plats. And so we thought that might help just to provide that clarification along the way. So wherever it has said preliminary plat, we've made it instead say preliminary long plat throughout the code. Okay, pre-application process. It says prior to the time where you file an application. It used to say you should contact the following agencies for the purpose of determining any requirements. I don't think anyone does that entirely. Sure, some of them will kind of consult here and there, but they don't necessarily go through that list before they make an application. So this says that they would be required to submit a form with the county, provide some stuff from the beginning, and sit down with the county staff for a pre-application conference. And that way they can get feedback.
Encouraged to require.
Right. Now, one thing I want to highlight is that once Derek deems an application complete for a preliminary plat, it has to go through within 90 days. That means all the public notification requirements, has to go through SEPA, has to go to a planning commission public hearing. Then it goes to the Board of County Commissioners for a closed record hearing. And, sometimes meetings take 2 meetings, when things get canceled due to lack of quorum or whatever else, things can happen. My point being, 90 days is not a lot for the county to process a preliminary plat. They get 120 days for a building permit. But again, only 90 days for a preliminary plat. It has to go to 2 hearing bodies. It has to go out for public notice, public review. So because of that, it's really important that the county can provide feedback before they even drop an application to say, yeah, this is going to look okay, or we really need to tell you about, you know, you want to do an exempt well, we need to give you some information on that. Or we're going to take a cursory look at what you're thinking about, and we're going to give you some feedback about
So where does that 90 days come from?
water sewer.
State law, or is that a?
It's state law, it's statutory
I would never
requirement.
volunteer.
No,
We
it's,
require that. This is something that was, shall we say, proposed to the legislature, and they decided that would be a good idea. It used to be shorter initially.
I
It
mean,
was 60 days, and then they moved it up to 90.
yeah, don't get me wrong, I mean, it's good in terms of we know that there's a timeline, we know that there's some assurance for developers that, you know, time is money, all of that kind of thing. So there is a benefit to having a timeline, but the 90 days is a big crunch, especially for small departments that have a lot going on,
A
like
lot
Franklin
of,
County.
yeah, I think a lot of state regulation is basically because of how things, okay, my understanding is subdivision in Seattle takes about 2 years. Here it takes a few months maybe, if everything's going and all that, you know.
Building permitting.
So-
Goes stretched way out.
So, you know, the building organizations, like the home builders and the developing firms and stuff, they're like, dude, this is not right. So then, rather than pick on the, shall we say, the guilty, everybody gets to pay the price for the guilty. So some jurisdictions have the resources to be able to ramp up and accommodate these types of changes. Other jurisdictions, I mean, I can't imagine, okay, granted, not a lot goes on, but anyways, some of these jurisdictions where you don't have the staff, you don't have the resources, and then you get hit with like 2 or 3 subdivisions all at once, and now you're having to pay third-party reviewers out of a budget you didn't, you see what I mean? It's, the state has a tendency to write cookie-cutter laws with an emphasis on what works on the west side. And they don't seem to understand that Eastern Washington is a whole different animal. Now, our representatives try to get them to understand that, but it just doesn't seem to work. And in fact, you'll see right at the beginning quite often, you know, people are on board with the legislation, and then as it goes through the process, it gets whittled down, and it's like, oh, well, this seems like it would work over there, but it's probably not going to work real well here. Unfortunately, that's just the way that works, and we get stuck with the results. And as Nicole had mentioned earlier, that a lot of what we're doing here is to bring our current code, which into compliance with these changes that have occurred, a lot of which have occurred in the last 5 years.
Okay.
So we're all working out of the same book then, what you're saying, right?
That,
More or less.
I think that's the theory when they initiated and voted on the things, but the reality doesn't tend to work out that way.
Right.
I just wanted to highlight, I'm dropping down a little bit. I'm on page 14 now, right before where it says public hearing required. And this is, because the other stuff's more like wordsmithing, so I don't want to go over it too much. But the part here where it's talking about a preliminary layout of water, storm drainage, and sanitary sewer systems, this specifies that if they are doing a groundwater withdrawal that's exempt from permitting, so a permit exempt well, it's on the applicant to comply with the applicable rules. This language is to keep the county out of trouble, basically. So it's not the county's duty to make sure that they have water available, or that their withdrawal is not going to hinder somebody downstream or, you know, within proximity. This is saying that it's the applicant who needs to comply, not the county, so that the county doesn't have to police those items. So just wanted to highlight that. Okay, and then now the next part that I think you'll want to look at here is the Planning Commission recommendations. That's 1620-060. I'm on page 15 now. Basically saying, as you well know, that the Planning Commission needs to render a written, I shouldn't say decision. I need to fix that. My apologies.
Yeah, it should be
Written recommendation. I don't like finding mistakes. Okay, we'll fix that. So you will still be providing a written, at least I found it, recommendation, not a decision to the board, whether an application shall be denied, approved with modifications, or if no recommendation is given. I think there's been times where you chose that option.
And
Anyways.
didn't get to.
So this gives you an out.
Oh, wow.
If that's something you want to pursue. There can be some reasons why that's not such a great idea for you to not give a recommendation, but we know that there are sometimes special circumstances. So if, like, for example, if you can't have a motion pass, what are you going to do? You come to an impasse. So then, in which case, the item would go on to the Board of County Commissioners, and they would say, Planning Commission looked at it, here's the record, here's the information they examined. However, no recommendation was given. And then following that, we have a section finding of fact. And this is a section that we modified quite a bit. Before it just addressed findings of fact, but we've added in the words and recommended conditions of approval. And what this does is provides an opportunity where it specifies that after the public hearing, Planning Commission can recommend conditions of approval that are necessary, and it talks about state law and everything else having to do with mitigation, environmental impacts, these types of things. It says, such as but not limited to, and here's all the things that you could recommend. You could say these lots or these streets need to be reconfigured. You could regulate lot sizes. You could make recommendations about maintenance agreements and so forth. So this is just kind of giving you some checkoff points, and staff as well. Staff would have to look at this list when they're preparing the staff report for you and make recommendations on conditions to say, yeah, this plot looks good, we don't need to recommend any big changes, or no, there's an issue here, we want to recommend a condition of approval where something would be modified.
And we already do this to some degree, but what this does is it basically makes everybody aware that it's a potentiality too, by including this language. So it just, again, it's trying to make sure that the public understands when they enter into these situations what they're actually dealing with. And it's just more information for them.
For better or worse, in this county, once this body makes a recommendation, it is open to an appeal, and it can go on appeal to the Board of County Commissioners. It's not a typical process, but it's what's done here. The point being that we've just kind of wordsmithed this a little bit, and we clarified that if folks want to appeal your recommendation before it goes to the Board of County Commissioners, the appeal should be based on a violation of law, process, procedure, or direct material harm to the appellant. And the burden is on the appellant to show the supporting facts for justifications of the claim. That's pretty basic language, actually. And then we've also clarified like the number of days they have, given them a little bit extra time. As you're aware, after you make a recommendation, it goes on to the Board of County Commissioners for their consideration, and we don't have any real changes there. This is just wordsmithing. I'm going to go forward a couple pages. Approval requirements appears on page 19. It is section 1624.050. Prior to approval of a long plat, infrastructure improvements need to be made. Now, this has to do with bonding. 24050. Yeah, so just to summarize, we changed this, the language about bonding for long plats so that they could only bond for the required road infrastructure. This is important because the county public works department does roads, but they don't do the other stuff. They don't do stormwater systems, they don't do streetlights, this other kind of stuff. So if we got to a situation where a developer wants to go bond for it and then they, I don't know, cut out of town, it would be a pretty high burden for this county now to figure out, you know, how to do that kind of stuff when that's not a typical responsibility of Public Works Department. So the concept here is to only let them bond for the roads, curb gutter sidewalk, things like that. And we're writing in bonds cannot be provided for non-road related improvements like utilities, irrigation, grading, and so forth. So that the county isn't left in a bind. Do you feel comfortable with that? Do you think that's a
I'm fine with that.
helpful improvement? Okay. Not a lot of bonding, I don't think, has occurred here,
I'm not aware of any.
but there are municipalities where it's quite common. They almost always will bond for the roads, almost always, so they can go record and they can start selling lots.
Or season will
Yeah.
dictate that. That's usually when I've seen it, is the asphalt plants have shut down, the bond for the road asphalt, so they can start selling the properties out, or things along those lines. Not here, I haven't seen anything like that here, but at Airway Heights, I saw that quite often.
Another benefit
No,
to the
you're
county of only allowing bonding to occur for the roads is that then it's probably less of a financial burden too, right? If the more things that we're letting them bond for, the higher the amount climbs to, and more that's on at stake, I guess. This keeps things more manageable financially too for the county.
Right?
What's that?
It's more expensive.
Well, yeah, if the county has to end up doing the work because a developer cuts out or defaults or whatever happens, things happen.
Right.
Can the county do it for the same cost that the developer would have done? No, because the county's got to go out to bid, the county's got to pay days vac. I mean, I don't know all the things, but the idea is the government's
Those were the two big ones.
government's always going to pay more to do the same work than the guy would have done originally. So that's part of the concept here. Don't put the burden on taxpayers. Okay, chapter 1628 comes up next, which is called subdivision improvements. That's page 20. And stop me if anything catches your eye that I skip over. But again, basically, we're just peppering in some language here about exempt wells. So once we got to the section about roads, sanitary sewer facilities, and water plans, we added in exempt wells are one of the things that fit into that mix. And then the next page, we go back to a section that has to do with survey. I showed you earlier a section about, what was it called? A plat and survey preparation. That was a standalone. Now this is survey that follows under long plats. So what we did is we took out the language that applied to long plats and short plats and moved it up in the title and took the stuff off. And then the things that are particular to subdivisions only are still here, I believe. So that kind of explains. A lot of these things haven't been just completely eliminated. They've been actually moved. Make sure I'm briefing this out right. 1628.
Does this take the surveyor out of the survey?
No. No. So
Oh, okay.
It's basically requirements that at a minimum they have to show on the documents they're submitting. And sometimes it doesn't really get into their process. They're like, we don't tell them how to do the survey, we just tell them these are the requirements that you have to meet for it to be a valid
Well, you
survey.
still got the established monuments and pins and everything, right?
yes. Yeah, it actually says permanent control monuments that meet the requirements of RCW, so on and so forth.
Oh, okay.
And it does talk about, it talks about surveys right there at the bottom.
And all lot
And that
staking
page.
has to be completed prior to the recording of the plat. Even if they bonded, they still have to have the staking done. And we had the county surveyor look at this language, and we got the thumbs up, so I feel pretty good about that.
Oh, I got you, okay.
Okay, the next chapter is short plats. Again, this change of the number of lots. So right now it says 4 lots or fewer is right now the threshold for a short plat, but now we're saying 9 and fewer, only in the urban growth areas. I won't repeat that since we've already gone over that. Let's see here. Oh, just an FYI, in case it catches your eye when you're looking at this. There used to be a mandatory requirement through the state that ecology needed to review any proposed subdivision that was partially or fully within a flood control zone. And that RCW no longer exists. So we are scratching that. Don't need that anymore.
Yay.
Next section, we're still in the short plat chapter. 1632-060 is administrative determinations. So what this says is that it's a reminder. We need to look at the critical areas ordinance. We need to look at zoning overlays, which could be something like the airport overlay zone, as it may pertain in the donut holes. And we need to look at resource land designations when we're doing short plats. This is kind of just a reminder to staff as they're doing their administrative duties that these things cannot be overlooked. And these things should be addressed in the staff report. So we're just calling that out. Rather than just saying, yeah, you have to comply with the zoning, right? It's being a little more specific. Really, truly, we're not adding another requirement here. We're just listing out the different things that need to be considered so that they don't get missed. And then we've added item 8 here that says the short plat needs to meet conditions for an innovative agricultural short plat as detailed in the zoning code, and that's where it's making references specifically to the AP 20 and AP 40 zoning districts where we have this provision where applicable. Right now, the subdivision code in Franklin County is actually silent about the innovative agricultural short plats. It's only found in the zoning code, and really we need to have them relate to one another. So this is the way that we can easily achieve that goal.
Well, Aaron, that kind of sums, we were just discussing this morning. I'm like, I can see where, and the reality is we'll also have it in the zoning code too, but to only have it there, the reason it was only there was it only applied to 2 zones. There was only 2 zones in the entire county that you could potentially do an innovative short plat. And they're designed specifically, and that's why it's got the title innovative as opposed to just a regular short plat, is that it's literally that. It's an innovative approach. And this is that flexible permit that we were talking about at the beginning, that allows for farmers or landowners out in those blocks, regardless of what they're doing with the property, to do some things that we all know as rural community are important. I'm a farmer. I've been out here. I've raised my kids here. I don't want to farm anymore, but I want to live in the house I raised my kids in. So I'm going to lop that piece off and sell my farm. Well, I don't want 20 acres. I only want a little place to, da-da-da. So innovative short plat. And that's when we say flexible, and be flexible in coming up with ways to address, it's things like that. So what it's doing there is it's balancing the needs of the farmer and the landowner against the need to protect and make sure that, it doesn't become a Lammert or something like that, and it's self-controlling because of the 20-acre reserves. So at a certain point, there's only so many lots that you can create, but at the same time,
usually you can do about 2 more lots than you actually need, in theory, but nowadays, I mean, that was, what I just said was more of the case back in the day. Nowadays, I'd say 60-70% of the applications are because parents are giving their kids land because their kids can't afford to buy a new home, their first home. And by giving them the land, they're able to use that as leverage or down payment effectively against the actual build of the house. And that's how they're getting around, not around, but they're able to
So
put
they
that
can
off.
afford
Plus,
it.
they're keeping them close by. They're a crop circle away. Yeah.
Yeah, so we just wanted to make sure that the subdivision code spoke to this practice in Franklin County. And it's not uncommon, right? You guys process a lot of integrative
Oh, yeah.
innovative agricultural short plats. Okay, I'm going to skip down because a lot of the changes that you see under this short plat section are identical to what I just briefed you on for subdivisions, in terms of like bonding, that kind of stuff. So we're going to skip down now to 1632-100, because I just want you to be aware, there was this troubling section E, which I had researched previously when, with Karen, it was some time ago, because there was this funny reference and I was trying to figure out what it was all about. The bottom line is this section should be stricken. It's about minor corrections to short plats. Somebody had asked me, can we do a minor correction to a short plat? So I tried to chase this all down. We checked the planning department files, we reached out to the commissioner's secretary, and there's no record of resolution 76-62. We don't know what it said, and truthfully, any of this kind of minor corrections to short plats is probably not something you want to have in your code. You probably want to have them go through this amendment process. So I'll just leave it at that, I think. Again, a section has been added about innovative agricultural short plats. I think you'll be happy with the language. It's basically mirrors what's in your zoning code. I guess the disadvantage of doing that is that if you want to change it one place, you have to, again, change it another. I don't see you making a lot of changes, though, and I think that putting it also in the subdivision code, even though speaking specifically to zoning districts, it creates a more transparent process, right? It's letting people know. Because if a farmer were unaware of this option and they hired someone and said, can you look at the subdivision code? I understand they're doing something out in Franklin County with these short plats. They would not have any idea about it reading Title 16 alone. And they probably wouldn't think to look in the zoning code. I know I sure wouldn't. So this is to help people out. We don't want to bury it in the back. It's something we want to make available to folks. I think I'm nearly done, believe it or not. When we move down to 1640, which is boundary line adjustments on page 32, I think you'll be happy to see again, we've talked about BLAs and how BLAs can occur when there are innovative agricultural short plats. In other words, this gives justification for the department to allow for a BLA, as long as the original intent of the innovative agricultural short plat is not abandoned. So people can do it, and then it's not set in stone. They can still get a BLA just like everybody else, provided that they.
I'd like clarification on that.
Yeah.
So I've created a 1 acre innovative short plat lot. And now I want to add 2 acres to it. So it's still not a non-conforming, it's still non-conforming technically in the AP 20. So I'm technically increasing the non-conformity, and that's usually a reason where I'm not allowed to let you do a BLA. This is intended to correct that.
Yeah, but it still maintains that 1 acre minimum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't go below that,
Yeah.
but
That's a good thing. Timelines for boundary line adjustments. This is another thing where the county has had the practice of really being put on the spot to turn these around super quickly. It's always been 15 days. Within 15 days of receipt by the planning director. It doesn't even say when an application's deemed complete. We have to do that boundary line adjustment. And this is good because, we don't want to burden people with the long waiting if they want to do a BLA. Just moving a property line should be a minimal affair. But once we get the federal agencies involved, then we need more days. It's just the way it is. If there is Bureau of Reclamation project facilities, or if there's Corps of Engineers easements, which I don't think you've encountered much, but that kind of stuff can happen. We want to make sure that the county staff is not on the hook for replying within 15 days for a BLA adjustment. They need time to reach out to those agencies and make sure everything's copacetic with them. So we're giving them 21 days generally, and then 45 days if there's a federal agency involved. They still have to be on the ball. The staff here is still going to have to kick this out as quick as they can, as quick as it comes in to meet that time requirement. But sometimes you send it to an agency and you get an out of office. This person's not coming back for a week and a half, and it's going to take a long time after that anyway. So we want to make sure we're being reasonable. All right. Real basic stuff. One thing I didn't touch too much, though I was tempted to, is 1652, dedication for parks. At some point, I think that needs to be its own project. It says in here that provision of parkland is required with subdivision, but then it also says that, hey, you can just pay a fee, and everyone does that. Everyone's going to pay this fee because it is ridiculously low. And then the reality of all this too is that the county does not have parklands. The county got out of the business of providing parks some time ago. There are park partners, as we've identified in the comprehensive plan. The city has parks, the state has parks, there's BLM land in the county, there's federal land in the county. So there are recreational opportunities abundant in Franklin County, but Benton County does not operate parks like other counties do. Because of that, this needs to be addressed sometime. But for right now, I don't really want to touch it. I think we just make a couple little typo changes, and that's really it.
Yeah, this moves into basically, this discussion would be combined with other potential, like transportation fees, these types of other things. If you're going to go into this area, you do it all.
It's Pandora's box.
And again, she said it. She said Benton County doesn't have any parks, but she meant Franklin County.
Oh, I'm sorry. Forgot where I was sitting. Okay, so thank you for correcting that. So that brings us to the end where I just mentioned to you that we can have a resolution that enumerates those fees for different applications. It doesn't need to be in the code, and as you look at it, you'll see what we were talking about, how they're really light anyway. So this might give some encouragement to relook at the fees if we put them in a resolution.
Yeah, the other thing associated with this, we said you had to do the 60-day commerce. Guess what else you have to do? You have to do a SEPA, because you're changing the text of the development code. And it has to go out for public comment, or you have to have a public hearing all of this stuff on our fees. And that's purely a policy decision made by the board based on the county's financial situation. And they're the ones that make this, feedback from the public, that's too high. Well, any increase, but at the same time, So, yeah, that's another, I mean, I frankly have never seen this I've never seen fees in an ordinance like this. It's always been in a fee resolution. And then what you do every 2 years, you kind of go through it and you look at it, you check your numbers, see if they're still accurate or whatnot. It's kind of usually the process for a fee resolution. So we're starting to look at that, putting something together. At this point, I don't know that we'll do the fee analysis or anything like that, but it's more a matter of transferring all the fees out of our ordinances onto the resolution as they set now, most likely, is what we'll do in the near term, then come back and discuss. Now, as you can see all the fees associated in one place, instead of going through each chapter, and then you got public works fees, and you got all these other fees. Have them all on one thing, it better informs the public too. So not only do you have your planning fees, you got your, this and that and these and that. I don't know what other ones are out there necessarily in the other departments, but eventually it's a one-stop shop. How much does it cost for a business license? There it is. How much is it to record a document? There it is. Even though it's outside of my department, the fee resolution can be set up to be a document that's used by the entirety of the county. And it just makes it's just all right there. You can see every single fee. You don't have to go to each individual place. It just makes life easier for folks too. So it's not just a convenience for us.
So are you saying that in your building department, then you would have you would list the fees associated with obtaining a building permit then, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the parks fee, the
Everything.
impact fee,
We don't have impact fees.
Well.
Those are
List it,
you know,
put 0 to
right.
make everybody feel good.
Yeah, no, but.
But no, yeah. The park dedication fees would be listed.
Health department?
No, it would only be, we could look at that, but this a fee resolution is only for the county fees, not outside agencies. We would have other documents maybe that have that, but the resolution is only those fees that the county board of commissioners has control to modify or amend. Some fees are just set, and those we can put on there, or we could leave them off. I would recommend putting them on there. It's just the way, doesn't, but things like the health department, that's on a case-by-case basis. I don't know exactly how they do it. I wouldn't even want to go there. But right now, so here you got subdivision fees. So now, but there's other zoning or whatever, there's fees scattered throughout our development codes. And in the building code, it's all listed, if I remember right, in the code itself. So you got to read through text. It's not an easy, again, we've put together some cheat sheets and stuff, but it just makes it a lot easier. Again, a lot of this is about just making it easier for the community, the public to understand. I'm a wonk. I do this all the time. It makes sense to me because I'm in it. People coming in, they've never done this before in their life, and things like that. We want to try to make it as easy as possible for them to get things as much in place as possible, because once they submit, those clocks start ticking. And there are exceptions to that rule, as long as both parties are in agreement for an extension of time, that's fine. And most people, frankly, I can probably count on one hand or a half a hand how many people haven't been willing to work with us, when there's an issue or something. But as these things get ratcheted down tighter and tighter, we need everybody, including the applicant, to be on the same page, because surprise is the enemy of diplomacy. So.
Well, it's such a process that many people.
People have no
it's
idea.
overwhelming.
People have no idea how much work is
Right.
involved in these things. I'm not, there's a lot of moving parts, and we've got to make sure that they're right every single time. And we're human, but it still doesn't remove our obligation to do our best to ensure that everything is the way it's supposed to be. Because people's livelihoods, first of all, we're public servants. We're here to serve the public, contrary to popular belief. That's what we do. We're not here to be obstructionists. We're here to try to figure out a way for people to get where they want to be, and we want to make it. But we also don't want people under a delusion of potentiality. I don't want somebody spending a bunch of time and energy on something that's never going to happen, because it just can't. So, you know, and we have to balance these things all the time, this constant balance between protecting the landowner rights, the developer rights, the neighbor's rights, the overall desire and need of the community, and what it sees, what the definition of the community is, because we got folks that, you know, rural folks have a different vision than the donut hole folks, and than the folks living in the actual cities, and then each city, you know, because again, folks that live in the cities are our residents too. It's just, they haven't done a layer. A different layer, and often that seems to be forgotten, that, you know, the residents of the city of Pasco are Franklin County residents as well. It's just they get their services from the city of Pasco, not us. But they still vote for commissioners, they still, you know, for the countywide positions, they all vote for them too. It's not like they're excluded. It's just the rural population is excluded from voting on the city people. It's just, so we have to balance all those things. And then this unprecedented growth that's being projected for this community and region is, I mean, the city of Spokane was expected to accommodate, I think, 25,000 people. And the city of Pasco is expected to accommodate 50,000 people. Now, some of that has to do with the county's different and the way they've got people scattered out, but yeah. Oh, well, I've always questioned that 50,000, but
Over
that's
how
what
much-
OFM said.
How much
And that's
time
what
is
we
that?
have to go with.
Over how much
20
time?
years. 20 years. It's a 2.92% growth rate projection annually, and compared to the state, that's at a 0.74 by 2038. So we're a young county, so we are naturally producing population. The majority of our population is under 50 years of age. So, and then we're having and we're also highly attractive to retirees coming from the west side, California, and other areas. Once people find out, wait, you really can golf? Yeah, as long as there ain't no frost on the ground. And if you wait for the frost to burn out, you can go golfing after that. It's pretty much, it's year round. Ooh, you know, fishing and stuff. You know, it's people are starting to realize this is a nice place to retire.
Place, right?
And our medical facilities are quietly some of the top in the state. It's surprising the quality of our medical facilities down here for a jurisdiction or a community this size, counting both sides of the river.
So I'm going to step away from here, but I just want to thank you for your time tonight. We'll be back with this, but yeah, I think this is good timing for us to be looking at these regulations, fine-tuning what we have, being ready for this growth, and making sure that we can kind of shepherd it along and look at the right criteria and everything moving forward. So I look forward to the next meeting. We can receive public comment or any other feedback that you might have after reading through things. You know, do let us know, and we can then take it to the next stage, which is preparing for public hearing.
And again, I want to reiterate that this is not a quasi-judicial item. You are more than welcome to show it to your friends, family, neighbors, do whatever, yeah, well, don't do whatever you want, but talk about it, because what we want this to do is to, of course, meet the requirements of law, but we also need it to reflect the needs and desires of the community that we're serving. So,
Is that everything?
on that part. So we're done with the workshop part,
Yeah, if you've got some others on your agenda.
but, so I can go into those if
Yes, please.
Go ahead, okay, real quick. So FutureWise Comp Plan Appeal Update. We are We have decided, it has been determined that the best course is to appeal the Growth Management Hearings Board ruling. So we're in the process of doing that and getting that paperwork filed. Or maybe some of it's, no, it's already been filed, hasn't it? Yeah, we already did that part. Now we're looking at going straight to the appeals court or Superior Court. They're working on that thing. Because if both parties agree, you can skip the Superior Court and go straight to the appeals court, save a step basically, and they're kind of looking at the yes or no on that. And then,
That's on the Growth Management Act?
no, this is the
What's the appeal on?
this is the Growth Management Hearings Board. Remember, we got appealed by our comp plan got appealed
Got appealed by FutureWise?
by FutureWise to the Growth Management Hearings Board. The Growth Management Hearings Board ruled against us, stating that, they stated that we did de-designate all tax agricultural lands of long-term commercial significance. We still disagree with that interpretation. And therefore and we believe that the law supports us, therefore we're appealing that determination to the courts. Then for 2022, I mean, we kind of hit it. I mean, basically our goal, and we'll see what we can get done this year, is Title 16, Title 7, which is, we just went over. 17 is the zoning code. That's third that's, I shouldn't have listed it second, because we actually have a mandatory requirement to update the Shoreline Master Program, review and update as necessary. And as part of the comp plan update, we have a mandatory obligation to do the critical areas ordinance. Now, because of the similarity between those two, we're kind of going to be starting to develop and process those as much as possible simultaneously. They both are going to require the the utilization of outside experts. I don't have a biologist on staff. I don't have a hydrologist or, these types of things. The Department of Ecology gave us a no-match grant of $84,000, and then AHBL will be acting as the lead, pretty much be doing the whole thing. All I do is pay the bills or process the paperwork. that's my 1 and 2. That was task 1 and task 2. I acquired the consultant. That was task 2, and I act as the project manager, technically. Yeah. So, and then Title 17. That's over 200 pages. So no, you will not get that in a solid chunk. Just here's 200 pages, let's have a chat. No, we're going to try to break it up into logical sections, or it just may be, a third at a time or something, but we're going to give it to you in pieces, and then you'll review all of those pieces. And then those will go to the board, those chunks, and they'll be like, so yes, we approve this one, that one, that one. And then we'll do a final move on that where we put all of it in a single document and go, all right, here's the whole document. Do you approve that? So that's kind of the way I'm envisioning it. Title 17, though we may start it this year, there's no way we would finish it this year. But I believe we're going to get on to it. I'm hoping by fall. We've just finished, we're about done with the first quarter of the year. So by fall, I'm hoping that we'll be maybe able to get that first portion done or something like that, but then it'll bleed into 2023. And then we'll see what other interesting things come down the pipe.
So we can do all this without a quorum, right? We can do all of the workshops and stuff like that?
We can do things without, that we don't take action on.
So what do we do, and maybe you're getting to that, but what do we do from this point on if we don't have enough people to have a quorum?
Well, Melinda's still on the board. or on the commission. But we have to postpone until I have a quorum. So that's another thing that may happen is I'm hopefully going to have, I've got an applicant, I'm hopefully going to get more. It's just, I've only received one applicant. We've advertised for it. We've, Commissioner Mullen brought it up again. There's been a couple times during commissioner meetings where it's been brought up that we want and need planning commissioners. We need one for the Star School, basically for Claude, and then we need, and then anybody should apply, even if there's not a vacancy. That way we have that person, like if somebody does create a vacancy, we can reach out to them and go, hey, are you still interested? I have no contact lists. I have to just randomly ask people. And frankly, for me, because of the role of the planning commission, technically others should be recruiting them. I don't feel it's necessarily, I will do it if I need to, but it's not optimum for the planning director to be recruiting the guard dogs. Because you guys are, again, I've said it before, part of your role is to make sure that I'm not crazy, and well, that's great, or to make modifications or things like that. You're representing the public, and you should be independent of me, just as you're independent of the board.
So you got one applicant?
I'm hoping to have that. I'm hoping to have that to the board by the 5th of April, and assuming all goes well, that person would be able, if and they do get appointed by the board, then they would be able to attend the April 12th meeting.
If you say you have a hardship as far as, can you move them around as far as jurisdiction? Like, does that matter?
Districts?
Or where does this person live? What district are they in? And can you cross?
No, nope. We're not an at-large planning commission. We are a district-oriented planning commission. That could be changed theoretically, but that's not the process I have to work with at this time.
So we still toe the line as far as that future commissioner would have to live in his district, right?
Yeah, so let's say Star that's up by Colotis, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's say somebody lives in Colotis. That's fine, because again, Colotis folks are residents of Franklin County. But it's not appropriate for somebody from Colotis to represent the UGA, the City of Pasco UGA.
Right.
When it starts getting into Connell and that area, that I could see where maybe there would be some flex there. And if that's what I had to present to the board, that's what I would present to the board, and it would be up to them to determine whether or not that would work for them. But yeah, again, I get the applications, I review the application for compliance, and then I make my recommendation, but I don't make the decision. That's the board's decision. And it's appropriate for them to appoint or recommend people, because that's...
The commissioners?
Yep.
Right.
It is appropriate and okay for them to go out and recruit someone and go, hey, but it's not so appropriate for me, because you're the check against me. You recommend to the board. So you don't, the positions are different. And that's about it for me, unless you all have any questions.